This is a webinar on the top enhancements since SOLIDWORKS 2016. My name is Greg Dawes. I'm an application engineer with Desai Solutions. And we're going to start off with a couple of polls just to see where people are at. So I'll start the first poll, which is on what version of SOLIDWORKS that you're using. We'll give this a couple of minutes just to get an idea of what the crowd's like. All right, looks like we have most responses in, so I'll go ahead and close that poll. Surprisingly, we've got the most amount of people choosing that they're on version 2018, which is great. You're on the newest and latest and greatest version of SOLIDWORKS. And then we have about equal amounts on 2017 and 2016. Only a couple on a 2015 or earlier. So this will, if you're on 2018 or 2017, this is really going to show you what you have and some things you might not know that you get when you upgrade while you're on subscription with Desai and SOLIDWORKS. For those of you who are on earlier versions, this is going to cover some things that you might be missing out on and some things you might want to consider for an upgrade. The next question that we're going to throw out there with a poll is, when do you usually upgrade to a new version? What causes you to do an upgrade? So again, we'll give that a couple of minutes and see where we're at. We've got about half the amount of people have responded, so I'll give it another minute or so. Go ahead, if you've just jumped in, go ahead and vote on the poll here on when you usually upgrade to a new version. All right, it looks like we're not having any more votes coming in, so we'll go ahead and close that poll. It looks like the number one upgrade path is once per year, which is interesting. Next up is whenever it's convenient. Kind of makes sense, especially for smaller teams in being able to upgrade your SOLIDWORKS. And then equally split, just one or two users responding with upgrading every service pack, or upgrading when technical support says you need to upgrade to fix an issue. This helps us quite a bit when we have internal discussions on where improvements in the software need to be focused. And it's interesting because we see internally we kind of lean towards the bug fixes and the stability improvements, but it looks like here we're just kind of doing it on a schedule or when it's convenient. So we'll go ahead and close that poll. Thanks for sharing those answers with me. We'll kind of get into the what the purpose of this presentation is about. Really, it's about showing you what's new in SOLIDWORKS 2016, 2017, and 2018, but that really hovers all around this idea of subscription. And normally if I go out to a customer and I do a customer visit and I just ask him, hey, what do you think you get for subscription? These are usually the three top ones, and a lot of times the only ones that I hear of when I ask our customer base, or even internally I ask some of our salespeople or some of our technical people who say, what do people get when they pay their subscription each year? And everybody usually knows that you get access to the annual release of SOLIDWORKS with the 200 plus enhancements each year. They usually know about service packs and bug fixes throughout the year. If you're not aware, we have 5 service packs throughout the year, and that you get technical support through your reseller of Desai. What people don't usually chime in about is all of this other stuff that we get with subscription when we renew each year. One of the most popular ones that when someone just says those top 3 and I say, hey, do you know that you get a free CSWA or CSWP? That's a Certified SOLIDWORKS Associate or a Certified SOLIDWORKS Professional exam voucher each year. That's usually a big popular one. Oh, really? Like I get a free exam to get certified in SOLIDWORKS at these 2 different levels. I think even in some of our internal people aren't aware that you get a free CSWA or CSWP voucher, but you also get 1 free CSWPA exam voucher. Now, this is multiple tests that you can take, but this is a Certified SOLIDWORKS Professional Advanced, and so you can take it in specific topics like sheet metal, weldments, drawings. So you get basically 2 free exam vouchers per year with your subscription. Next up is SOLIDWORKS Visualized Standard. With every version of SOLIDWORKS Professional and Premium comes with Visualized Standard. And if you're not aware on how to get that license that you get with your subscription, you just need to let Desai know and get a hold of tech support, and they'll be able to help you out in not only getting that license, but getting it installed. My SOLIDWORKS Standard, and we're going to cover this later on in the presentation, but My SOLIDWORKS is a portal where you can get anything from training to access to the forums to your customer portal of SOLIDWORKS to download new licenses, even doing a test drive of the new SOLIDWORKS version or the new SOLIDWORKS version of beta software, so you can see if you want to upgrade or not. My SOLIDWORKS comes in a guest account, so if you don't have an account at all and you go out to mysolidworks.com right now, you'll still have access to some of the training and some of those resources, but with a subscription through SOLIDWORKS, you get access to My SOLIDWORKS Standard, and really that's about more training options for you. E-courses, lesson plans that are video-based, lots of training available through My SOLIDWORKS Standard. Also, SOLIDWORKS CAM Standard, new in SOLIDWORKS 2018, is SOLIDWORKS CAM. That comes with every single license of SOLIDWORKS. I think that these past 2 really relate to each other. My SOLIDWORKS Standard has a bunch of content on how to get started in SOLIDWORKS CAM, but that's some of the things that they add as a benefit to your subscription, some value to your subscription each year, is that we're adding products to the lineup that aren't paid for products, but they're just products that you get when you upgrade to your latest version and you stay on subscription. It looks like I was not sharing my screen, so let me get that going there. Nobody chimed in the chat, but if you see something wrong, go ahead and chime in on the chat and I'll try to get that fixed. So this is a recap of what I've been going through so far with subscription. And then the last one at the very bottom there is the annual update events. We make a big deal out of these at Desai. We go around through all of our locations in the Midwest and the West Coast and do a rollout presentation. So we're rolling out the brand new software and walking you through. It's usually a good 2.5 to 3 hour presentation with refreshments and lunch provided. We always encourage people to come out because it's the best way to kind of understand everything, those 200 plus enhancements each year, what are some of the highlights, and even some demonstrations of going through those tools. So look out for those invites, probably coming in September, and the events are usually held in October. Next up, we're just going to go year by year here, 2016, 2017, 2018. And if I have some time, I'm going to take one per each one of these 3 years and jump out and do a bit of a demo on it. But I just threw out some of my favorites and some of our customers' favorites enhancements from each one of these years. And in 2016, I think the biggest change, and if you did this upgrade, you saw it, was the modernized user interface. And really the push behind that was to better support scaling for 4K monitors now. You can see this range of buttons that I have on the screen. They redid all of the icons in the software, and they provided different sizes of these icons for each one of the buttons in the software. So this means that whether I have a really small screen and I want to have a larger button size, we can change that in the user interface options, or if it just needs to automatically scale to one of these based on using a 1080p monitor or a 4K monitor. Along with that user interface is this redesigned triad for clarity. I think just putting the two different triads to move parts and things around in space in SOLIDWORKS really shows you the difference between the two. The one in the past was really busy. We had the three arrows to move along, and we had these three hula hoops to rotate around with, and they've really condensed that and made it much clearer in 2016. Another new one that had been asked for quite a while in the enhancement requests for SOLIDWORKS was being able to create your own custom threads. That's now a built-in tool right out of the box from SOLIDWORKS to be able to create your own custom threads. One of my favorites that I had to put in here was the style splines and the Bezier curves. I think in the past, splines have been kind of difficult, especially for new users to use and understand, and it's really easy to make a small tweak to a spline using the control handles that would really make dramatic changes that you didn't want to splines. I've actually completely replaced my regular spline tool with this style spline tool. We've kept both, and you can actually switch in between the two, which is really nice. But I just think it's a lot easier to control these style splines and to get Bezier style curves in SOLIDWORKS now. And then the last one I have listed here is the Make controller. Especially for some of our more complex assemblies that have lots of movement in them. Our customers have really loved this, where we can gather up all of the mates that we want to control inside of this Make controller, and we can change their values all within one window, and even save configurations per state that we've put the model into with different mate values. So things like distance mates that can have different distances, angular mates, rotations, controlling all of that for multiple mates. I think this robotic arm is a really good example of it, and saving those as configurations. It's a lot easier to predict how your model is going to move around in space. Also in 2016, and the one I think I'll go through the demo here on, is SOLIDWORKS Visualize. In 2016, SOLIDWORKS grabbed a tool called Bunk Speed, which was a renderer more in our parent company, the Dassault, that they brought into SOLIDWORKS and rebranded as SOLIDWORKS Visualize. With your subscription dollars and you have SOLIDWORKS Professional, you will get SOLIDWORKS Visualize Standard, which allows us to do more realistic renderings than we could in PhotoView 360. It's going to more use our graphics processor to do rendering as well, meaning that we get much faster renders, more accurate renders through SOLIDWORKS Visualize. And then if you get SOLIDWORKS Visualize Professional, which is an upgrade, that adds the ability to do animation, interactive image output, support configurations, add area lights and light placement, and even produce some VR content like you can see here using a 360-degree camera. So at this point, I'll hop out of the PowerPoint and hop into SOLIDWORKS Visualize just to give you a real bare bones example of what SOLIDWORKS Visualize looks like. If you tried it in 2016 and haven't since, they've updated this the splash screen, the start screen, where we can start from recent projects, sample projects, or even recent SOLIDWORKS documents and just open up an assembly right away and start working on it in Visualize. You'll see that this is not embedded inside SOLIDWORKS, and you don't even need a SOLIDWORKS license to run SOLIDWORKS Visualize. So if you have someone from a non-technical department, maybe like marketing, that wants to create images from the 3D CAD. In the past, it was giving them a license of SOLIDWORKS. It was making sure that the file was read-only, so they didn't make changes to the assembly. Now we don't have to worry about that. They can do this all in Visualize, and it's not going to affect the models from SOLIDWORKS. So from here, I'll just do a file open, and I'm actually going to browse not to a Visualize project or anything, but start directly from a SOLIDWORKS assembly. I'll grab this coffee mug tree. Something new is that importing a lot of the different information that we can define in SOLIDWORKS, in Photo View 360, and even just SOLIDWORKS in general, like the appearances, cameras that we've defined in SOLIDWORKS, any scenes or decals that we want to bring in, and we can bring in all of that information into SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Once it's open, one of the things I like is that we have really fast previews of the render. You may see that it's a little grainy, but it does give us really realistic views of this right away, and even as we make changes. One of the new things is being able to use our SOLIDWORKS appearances instead of Visualize specific appearances. So maybe for the coffee cup itself, I'll grab a paint, and we'll grab a high gloss, and we'll just drag and drop a blue onto that coffee mug, and it applies to all the parts within that. We'll grab a metal, and maybe a nickel, and grab a polished nickel and drag and drop that on the tree itself. Applying different cameras and views is just dragging and dropping as well. You can just right click and create a new camera, or I've got some predefined cameras in here. Maybe I want multiple different views of this and multiple different images of it, and I can just drag and drop different camera definitions into that graphics area and get an update on that picture. Now when we render, this is going to render much faster because it's better using our graphics card that we have. If you're aware, we've got some pretty strict requirements on graphics cards for SOLIDWORKS, but we're really not using that too much in Photo View 360. In Visualize, we're really relying on that graphics card to do a lot of our rendering, which is saving us some time on the render front. Alright, didn't want to dive too deep on that one, just wanted to introduce SOLIDWORKS Visualize, and think you get that with subscription to SOLIDWORKS Professional and SOLIDWORKS Premium. Here's some example images created from SOLIDWORKS Visualize. A couple of these definitely tricked me on whether this was just a photo booth with a picture of an actual product or if it was rendered. And just a few examples of what kind of quality of renders that we can get out of SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Alright, next up we'll cover 2017. Some of my favorites that were added and some of our customers' favorites that were added to the software in 2017 was some new administration options when it comes to deploying the software and really just administering how SOLIDWORKS is set up. Pushing with an admin image to be able to lock your system options for document templates, where the toolbox is located, all of those folder references that SOLIDWORKS needs to different resources. We can lock all that down and set that through the admin image now. Shaded sketch contours, which is a lot easier to grab pieces and points to it. We do always, when we move forward, give you the ability to turn this on or off. Some of the assembly delighters, like being able to group component instances, that's one of my favorite, so I don't have to create a folder and drag and drop every common instance of a component into that folder. We can have SOLIDWORKS automatically sort those for us. And section cuts with transparent bodies. We can do this both in assemblies and parts. And I have that shed as an example to show you making some parts transparent and whether or not they are cut or not cut with the section view. Then next up is the magnetic mates to support some facility layout. Up in the top right hand corner here, you can see these little pinkish purple dots and rubber bands. and we can build these almost Lego pieces, so when we drag and drop them into an assembly, it's automatically looking for another one of those pink or purple dots to snap to and mate to, which is going to make, if you do it on a big sub-assembly like one of these conveyors and you drop it into a larger assembly that's your facility layout, we can drag and drop these in and have them placed much easier. Visualize improvements from the previous year, and then the highlight, I think, of 2017 was 3D Interconnect. So here are some of the improvements to SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Animations on exploded views, animating section cuts and transparency in Visualize, and then the last one that I'm going to break out for 2017 here is the 3D Interconnect. This is the ability to use the native files from other CAD software platforms. In this example, we're going to go through an Inventor example and a PTC example, and if we've got some time here, going through that Solid Edge example. So we'll switch over to SOLIDWORKS, and I have an assembly open here that I want to be able to use a supplier part from, but they're on a different CAD system. Maybe they're on Autodesk Inventor. So I'll insert component, and I'm going to browse into my supplier parts and filter out for Autodesk Inventor assemblies. And just because I'm bringing over the .iam, which for Inventor is their assembly files, I also, if I change my filter, can see I have all of the parts that make up that assembly as well. And with SOLIDWORKS 3D Interconnect, which comes with every single version of SOLIDWORKS 2017 moving forward, it actually understands the tree relationship, all the reference geometry like planes and defined planes and undefined planes. We get the ability to bring those in and use those natively in a SOLIDWORKS assembly. So we'll bring in that battery pack assembly and just drop that into space. And right away here, you're going to see that I get a new icon. I'll try to zoom in here for you. I get a new icon on that import of that assembly, which shows a little green arrow on it. And that means that I use 3D Interconnect to bring in that subassembly. And that means that it's linked back to that original Inventor assembly. And you're going to see why that's important here in a second when we make updates to it. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. It has the full feature tree structure to it, and it has all of the planes and the origin that originally came with it. We're just not converting it to a SOLIDWORKS file. We're leaving it as an Inventor subassembly. So we'll go ahead and mate this into place. We can use the geometry just like we would use any geometry in SOLIDWORKS, like mating to planes and faces, hiding components to be able to mate to something behind it. The geometry is red just like it would be SOLIDWORKS geometry. We're just not converting it to a SOLIDWORKS file. All right, now that that's made it into place, of course, as soon as we get our work done here, we get a call from the manufacturer or project manager saying, hey, we no longer want to use 4 AAA batteries, we want to use 6 AA batteries. So we get with our supplier, and they make the model changes that needs to happen. They send us a new part number of that subassembly. And in Windows Explorer, just where we manage our files, I'm going to go into where they sent us a battery pack version 2. I'm going to copy all of the Inventor files from that version 2 file and paste them into the directory where I'm currently referencing that Inventor subassembly. So it's asking me here, we have the exact same files, do we want to replace them? I'll say yes, and I'll get rid of that Windows Explorer window, Now when we head back into the SOLIDWORKS assembly, I'll zoom in again. We have a new icon on that assembly. That's that little refresh icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the subassembly. That's telling us that we have a new version of it and we need to update it. So we'll zoom back out here again. I just right-click on that and choose Update Model. And it's going to reread the references from those from that folder. And now I'm using 6 AA's instead of 8 AAA batteries. We swapped it out with a new one. And we've maintained all of the mates, the 3 mates that I added to put this into place. We've maintained those mates. So really the benefit here is no longer having to translate these Inventor files, but just use them. And we can use them and adapt to the changes that happen to these models from our suppliers. If you have any questions, feel free to jump into the chat and chat me if you have any questions about these tools. Next one up, we're going to stay in the battery area and stay in here. I'm going to toss that to the right. Next one up is a different way to use that same 3D Interconnect tool, where I'm going to go into my supplier parts and I actually am getting my pulleys from a vendor that uses Pro-E or Creo. So I'm going to filter out when I do a file open. So instead of doing an assembly insert, I'm doing a file open, and I'm going to open up this primary output pulley and hit open. Now this is being treated as a derived part, meaning that I do have a SOLIDWORKS file now, but its first feature in there is a part reference from the original Pro-E file. What this means is that I can either just use it from here, or I can add features to it. Like a cut in the tool here. I'm just making up a feature here so you can see it update when we move on. And then use that within my assembly. So we'll pan these left and right. And drag and drop that into my assembly here. Once the supplier, or we work on it and we realize that this edge here is too thick, we want it a little bit thinner towards the outside, and we want this to be a lighter weight pulley, we do the same process. So I'm going to bring back in Windows Explorer, and I'm going to go into my alternate versions, and they sent me over a new output pulley. You can see that Pro-E handles their file versioning a little bit different. So it adds an extra extension to it of .2, and 3D Interconnect reads that just fine. So we'll have both files here within Windows Explorer, our original .1 version and our new .2 version. And when I hop over to SOLIDWORKS and I refresh or update that model, you can see that it's updated the model, but it's still kept my cut that I cut through the model. So again, it's things that we can add to it, but still maintain a reference to that original Pro-E file, even if that Pro-E file updates. Then lastly, and I'll just show that with this example here, if we ever want to, we can treat these inserted files like we have in previous versions of SOLIDWORKS. We'll do this with a solid edge assembly. And because this is like a out of a catalog, we know we're not going to work with a vendor to make changes to this. So I can actually just right-click that assembly and choose Break Link. When I break this link, it's treating it like an import instead of a reference to the original file. So when I hit yes, break the link, now it's going to be its own SOLIDWORKS file, not related back to the solid edge assembly. And that's a quick rundown of 3D Interconnect. Next up is 2018, our newest release of SOLIDWORKS. Some of the highlights, in my opinion, are the admin portal and online licensing, which I'll go through. Pin and touch-based interactions, especially the Microsoft Surface line, is really improved over the last few years. And we wanted to utilize that new technology of a pin input or a touch-based input inside of SOLIDWORKS. So now, pinch to zoom, picking and placing components, choosing a configuration can all be done with just touching with your finger. And we also have a pin mode within the sketch environment where we can sketch these generic shapes and it'll turn it into SOLIDWORKS sketch entities like arcs and lines. One that I know a lot of my customers specifically have enjoyed is the sheet metal tab and slot. Being able to pick an edge and a face on a multi-body sheet metal part or just a regular assembly, and being able to put tabs on one body and slots in the corresponding body in the corresponding location really sped up that process instead of having a complex library that you have to drag and drop in for each tab and slot that you want to have and making sure that they're lined up. This is an out-of-the-box tool that'll work for you. That little animation up top is an example of using tabs and slots in your designs to kind of reduce fixturing, being able to put components into place, snap them in with these tabs and slots, and then go through and weld after the fact after it's all put together, really reducing fixtures. And then the highlight, I believe, for 2018 in general is SOLIDWORKS CAM coming with every single version of SOLIDWORKS. SOLIDWORKS Standard, SOLIDWORKS Professional, and SOLIDWORKS Premium all give you access to 2.5 axis milling within right inside of SOLIDWORKS. So let's take a look at that. There are two versions of SOLIDWORKS CAM. SOLIDWORKS CAM Standard, again, that's the one that comes with every single version of SOLIDWORKS, every single flavor of it, Standard, Pro, and Premium. And that gives you CNC programming inside of SOLIDWORKS. It's powered by a CamWorks, which has been around, I think, 20 years now. So it's a very well-established product. It actually got started as a kind of a fun project within SOLIDWORKS Corporate. Then it broke off as its own entity. And now we're kind of bringing on CamWorks again inside the SOLIDWORKS environment. It's really based off of rules-based machining. You can go through and manually define features and operations and tooling and tool paths, but to get the most out of it, I'm really encouraging people who are looking into SOLIDWORKS CAM to build up their TechDB. This TechDB is a library where you can build in, search for these types of features. If you find these types of features, add these operations to it and add this tool sizing to it and these speeds and feeds per material. That way we could get really close and have less iterations or less time it takes to generate our post through with CAM. It is limited to 2.5 axis milling. We do have toolpath simulation, which you can see in this image down below, and a pretty big library of posts that are available. And actually our West Coast offices have been supporting this product since it was CamWorks for quite a while. So Desai has a big library in addition to what's shipped with SOLIDWORKS CAM for posts. So if you're looking for a post and it's not in the software, reach out to us and we'll help you out there. If we don't have it and SOLIDWORKS CAM doesn't have it, we can create a post for you for as a service, or we can just provide you with the tools to create your own post. SOLIDWORKS CAM Professional, everything below the line there is really the highlights of the difference between CAM Standard and CAM Professional. This gives us the ability to do 3+2. So in another word, do indexing, 2-axis turning. It supports assembly environment. So if we want to make sure that we're avoiding clamps and fixtures and the machine itself, we can machine a part or produce CNC programming for a part in the assembly environment. And it also supports configurations of parts. Oh, before we move on there, I wanted to show you a quick demo of SOLIDWORKS CAM. Looks like we're doing pretty well on time. As a quick introduction, this is a simple 2.5 axis part within inside of SOLIDWORKS. To turn on CAM, we'll just go to our options up above and go to add-ins. And I'm going to find SOLIDWORKS CAM and turn that on. That does a couple of things to my user interface right away. It adds 3 additional tabs along the top of my feature manager, my CAM feature tree, my CAM operation tree, and my tools tree. And then it also adds a tab along the top of the ribbon for all the different options that we can have that are CAM specific. So in this case, we'll go through the process of defining the machine that we're going to use. We'll pick a tool crib that's related to that machine, a library of tools that can be used with that machine. Which post processor are we going to use? In this example, we're using a FNUC controller to get out our post. And then any setup for some of the CAM professional things like indexing. Next up, we go to the stock manager and we define how we want our stock to be defined. So in this case, I'm going to use it as a bounding box, and I'm going to of our actual part, and then I can actually add offsets to each of the sides that represent the actual stock that we're going to cut from. So I'm just adding a millimeter to every side. We'll define a coordinate system. A lot of the times with SOLIDWORKS being a Y up definition for the design area, in the machining world, usually that's a Z up. So we can actually edit a different point on the model and different axes as their direction for our coordinate system to be defined. So we'll pick dot on our stock, not our part, but our stock. Make sure that our arrows are all facing the right direction for X, Y, and Z, and apply that definition. Then we'll extract our machinable features. This again, we can actually add and pick and choose our sketches and faces to define these features, or we can have SOLIDWORKS CAM from that library find those features for us. And it found a perimeter open pocket, a couple of irregular pockets, a regular rectangular pocket, and the irregular pockets on the inside, and then a group of holes. From here, we'll generate operation plans for each one of these. You can see after the feature name, it says rough finish or rough rest finish. These are all going to tell CAM, when I generate the operation plans, which operations to grab. So you can see I have a lot more operations than I do features, because for most of these, I'm going through with a rough pass and then a contour pass, so a finish pass. I can sort these in any way I want. I'm going to sort them by operation type. I want all my rough mills listed first, then my contour mills, then any drilling operations, and then secondarily I want my operations sorted by tool size. So I want to go largest to smallest in the tools. So when I hit apply and we look back at that CAM feature tree, you can see that all of my rough mills are first. And if you notice the tool names, 24 flat end, we're going largest to smallest, and then starting again with all of our contour mills, going largest to smallest, and then our drills. From here, we can update or add information or tweak our operations. I'll just pick one of these rough mills, just double clicking it, and this is all of the parameters for that operation. Which tool we're using, I can grab a different tool from the tool crib, or add a tool that's not specific to this tool crib. Change my feeds and speeds, whether they're being fed from the library or I want to type those in manually. The actual strategy itself, so I'll change that from a pocket in to a pocket, from a pocket out to a pocket in. Any of our allowance and step over, what do we want our maximum first steps to be, the final amount of cut, all of the different operations. One of the things that I've liked as I've been learning this software over the last year or so is that each time I pick into a new box, my image of what that's defining pops up here. So I don't need to be a machinist expert right off the bat to be able to know what's going to change when I change my step over value, or if I change my island allowance, what does that mean? That's all shows me in images through the software. From here, then I'll generate toolpaths. I have my definition for these operations. Now I can generate and do the math for what the toolpaths need to be. And as I hover over these, you can see the actual toolpaths themselves in a graphical form. And then if I really want to verify it, and this may be a little choppy over the webinar, but we'll try it out to simulate the toolpath. We'll try that one more time here. I'll slow down this tool so we can really see it through the webinar. We can turn on whether or not we see the chuck or the holder. We can turn it on whether or not we want to see the tool. Just verify that we're not going to have any interferences or that we're going to go into any clamps or anything. Just verifying our toolpath and watching that through. Once that's done, it's all about just posting to the correct G-code format. So we'll hit post process, and I'll save that to my desktop. And when I hit play, it's going to write all that NC code to that file. One thing that's really neat, I think, is this option to, after the file's been created, open the G-code file in a tool that comes with SOLIDWORKS CAM called the SOLIDWORKS CAM NC editor. If I have that box checked, when I hit OK, after it's been launched, we have a very granular tool that we can go through and make any custom edits that we want to the G-code after the fact. All right, so I can get through the entire content here. Just want to give you a quick introduction to these things. That is an intro to SOLIDWORKS CAM. And two more topics before we call it a day here. One I think is important for SOLIDWORKS 2018 because it gives you flexibility, more flexibility than we have in the past with our licensing. First of all, you don't have to use online licensing to use the admin portal. The admin portal is new for 2018. And we've realized over time that the SOLIDWORKS product portfolio has gotten bigger. Sometimes you want a certain group to have certain tools like PCB and electrical, and other tool departments to have routing, but not everybody gets routing. So the admin portal is a way to assign and keep track of all of the licenses that you have and the products that you have. So what you can do is you just send an email from the admin portal to all of your users to have them join, and then you can start assigning available products to those users and have a much better grasp on what licenses you have and who they're assigned to. Something that's sort of involved with it, but it's brand new, is the online licensing option. So this doesn't, if you have a network license of SOLIDWORKS, this doesn't change how you're going to function at all. But if you have a standalone license, we now have two different versions of this standalone license. And we can switch them back and forth really easily. It's not a problem. The first is how we've always done it, which is machine activation. And I think this picture does a really good job of showing you what machine activation means. It means that we install SOLIDWORKS on a particular computer and we activate it on that computer. It doesn't matter which users sign into that computer to use SOLIDWORKS. SOLIDWORKS will be available to them because it's activated on that machine. The new option, this online licensing, we actually activate the license to a user and then they can use SOLIDWORKS on any machine that has SOLIDWORKS installed on it. This is great for companies that have a desktop user that also takes a laptop out in the field and maybe even has a secondary desktop at home that they do some remote work from as well. You don't have to have 3 different licenses activated on those 3 different computers. You would just switch that user to an online license instead of machine activated, and then every time they fire up SOLIDWORKS, all they have to do is log in and it activates that session of SOLIDWORKS. So this definitely gives our users a lot more flexibility in how they do and how you do managing multiple computers and licenses. Then lastly, what I wanted to cover was my SOLIDWORKS. I really don't think this gets enough credit out there with our customer base. but My SolidWorks is a website that you can go to, and even if you don't have SolidWorks, you can go out to My SolidWorks and get a lot of information on training, downloading sample CAD models, participating in the forum conversations, and even test driving SolidWorks. Right now, you can go out to mysolidworks.com and test drive SolidWorks. You're going to be using SolidWorks through a browser to see if it's right for you, or to see if you want to upgrade to the newest version. In the 2019 beta that's coming up this summer, it should be coming out towards the end of this month. They're also opening this up to 2019 beta. So we'll be able to do our beta testing, or you can try out the new 2019 functionality of beta within that browser instead of installing a full thick client of SolidWorks. My SolidWorks Standard, if you're on subscription, you need to get a hold of your salesperson and let them know, hey, I want My SolidWorks Standard, and they can get you hooked up with more training options through those lessons and learning paths. And then if you really find that valuable, My SolidWorks Professional is available. And I know that this is included a lot of quarterly deals as well. If you're buying a new license of something, you'll get My SolidWorks Professional for a year thrown in. So keep an eye out for those deals that are out there. I think I see a couple of salespeople in our webinar right now, so make sure you give them a call. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up with, I went over the last 3 years, some of my highlights, and like the big ones being SolidWorks Visualize, SolidWorks 3D Interconnect, and SolidWorks CAM. We're going to do one more poll to see which one of those areas did you find most interesting, why do you upgrade each year, that type of thing. So if you could participate there. After you're done, maybe I'll share these results here, and then we'll let you go. All right, it looks like we've got most of the votes in, and it looks like we're tied between SolidWorks 3D Interconnect using the native file formats from other CAD vendors inside of our SolidWorks application, and we're tied with feature updates. Yeah, that's some of my favorites too. Each year I see these little tools that I was like, oh, that's really nice to use. So between feature updates and 3D Interconnect, and then we're fairly well split between the other three of SolidWorks Visualize, SolidWorks CAM, and the admin portal and online licensing. All right, well, I am about 10 minutes early. If anybody wants to throw some chat questions out there, please do so. Otherwise, we are done. Thank you.